your goal here is to graduate, is to finish, right? Sometimes we have these ideas where we want to change the world, we want to save the world. Do that after you get the PhD at the end of your name.
Welcome to the Grad Coach Podcast, or for those who know, the GCPC, where as ever, we are here to simplify, demystify, and take all the anxiety out of academia. And also, as ever, I remain your host, Dr. E. But today, I am joined by Dr. William Adams. Now, Dr. Adams has been within the walls of academia for years, supervising dissertations and theses at Campbellsville University, and having worked with hundreds of students over the past few years, Bill knows exactly what examiners are looking for and what it takes to produce the perfect project and pass that postgrad degree. You know you gotta love the alliteration. In this conversation, Dr. Adams is going to share 5 gems he wishes every research student knew before starting their dissertations or their thesis. And if you are tackling any sort of postgrad research project, these insights are sure to save you months of stress and set you up for success. And don't forget, while you're here, to grab your free copy of the Grad Coach Research Toolkit. You'll find that in the links in the description, somewhere down here, down below. It's going to be packed full of hundreds of templates, checklists, videos, tutorials, and guides, all designed to fast track your research and save your sanity. There'll be over 10,000 students have already used these to get an unfair advantage, and you can too. Otherwise, of course, remember you got to please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and feel free to comment with any questions you might have for any of our future professors. Otherwise, Bill, you ready for this?
Absolutely. Fire away.
Good. All right, then. In that case, let's dive into it. Let's start with your first gem, your first few words of wisdom, the things that you think or you hope students would know, which is to say that, to quote you, sir, a dissertation doesn't fail at the finish line. It fails at the gates nobody defined. Now, besides the fact that it sounds like poetry, I just want to know, what are the gates that we have, that have gone undefined? And how do we avoid a failure that we can't see coming?
I think the biggest takeaway from that quote is there should be milestones. And a lot of the dissertation programs that I'm involved with now, we have milestones. But back when I got my was doing my dissertation, 15 years ago, I can't believe it's been that long. But there wasn't as many milestones set in place where, you were kind of more out on your own. And I think it's an important part of this whole process that you have, a set plan in place of milestones. By this point, I want to be here. By this point, I want to be here. And you're working towards those milestones. For me, anyway, when I'm working on a huge project, a significant project, it helps me to be able to celebrate those little victories along the way. Otherwise, you get to a point where you're stagnant, and there's still a lot of folks that get to the dissertation and don't finish. And I think that's a real shame. And I think one of the parts of that is they don't set up these milestones along the way, or they don't, just having a plan. Coming from manufacturing and operations, planning, before, back when I had a real job in manufacturing and operations, it was, all about the plan, meeting our plan, our objectives, setting our targets and objectives. And I think those same principles can apply in our research. Otherwise, we can get stagnant, and, life happens, things happen along the way that distract us. But I think if we stay focused and we break this big, massive project down into doable pieces, it makes it a lot better for the researcher to kind of see the progress and keep that momentum going.
Okay. I mean, I'm with you. All right. So look, let's say milestones. I agree. I'm wholeheartedly on your side on this point, and it kind of makes sense from a manufacturing point of view or from an academics point of view, right? We need to have milestones put in place so we know how we're making progress and when we're making that progress. But the problem comes in trying to determine what an appropriate milestone is, or how large that mile ought to be, right? So if we're talking about undefined goals or failing at points without knowing where we're really supposed to be going, how do we know what qualifies or what should constitute a reasonable milestone? How far am I supposed to go before I can tell myself, okay, you've got that success, you got that win, you got that in the bag, and you can actually feel confident about it? Or at what point do I know where a milestone should be set?
That's a great question. And what I would say is keep that dialogue open with your dissertation chair. Sometimes we get in a mindset where we think, oh, this is just all on me. I don't want to ask this question. I would much rather, as a dissertation chair, have my candidates ask questions and keep that dialogue open. Now, obviously, I can't speak for everybody, but for me personally, I would rather, I want to see them be successful. And so I encourage that dialogue. And if they have questions about, I can help them structure that plan. I think that's part of it as the responsibilities of being a chair is you help them set those milestones. And again, a lot of places now they have those milestones defined. Certain tasks that have to be accomplished at this point and at this point and at this point along the journey. But I would just say keep that dialogue open with your dissertation chair if you do have those questions, because you're not, sometimes it can be isolating. You can feel like you're out there on an island by yourself. And I think it's important to remember that your chair is there for a reason, and keep that dialogue open and keep talking and communicating with your chair and asking those questions. Ask any question. There's an old saying, there's no stupid questions. Ask the questions. That's what I encourage my candidates to do, is to keep that dialogue open and keep asking those questions.
I like that. See, but this is a point I feel like I'm gonna come back to at some point, either in this podcast or another one. But the idea that it's your supervisors or your professors or whoever it is that's overseeing your project, it's their responsibility to be able to help you develop that plan. I feel like that's important, because it's not just whether or not we ask the questions, but it's whether or not we enforce that responsibility. Because sometimes they ain't so nice. Like maybe they don't want to be as helpful as you want to be, and maybe I need to remind you, my guy, I need a plan. Just how do I do this?
Right. That's right.
Gem 1 out of the way. Let's move on to your second gem, your second pearl of wisdom here. The next thing that you feel like students need to know, which is to say, if your claim can't be traced to your data, it isn't a finding, it's a wish. Now, I absolutely agree. Most students will almost intuitively understand that any claims must be supported by evidence, or at least they hopefully will understand that any claims must be supported by evidence in the data that you've collected. But the question I've got here is, how much of a wish is the interpretation of the data and the implications we're supposed to be inferring from our findings? So while it's true that we need to be able to trace our claims back to our data, it also seems to be true that at some point we need to interpret that and extend those interpretations into implications. So how much of those implications are just a wish, or how connected are they to your data?
In my experience, the successful dissertations, you got to get to the defense, right? You have to defend what you're saying. So part of that is connecting it continuously. I call it like a golden thread. You have to have that golden thread. You have to keep that golden thread intact, and you don't want to make claims. You don't want to do that without the evidence to back it up, without the data to back it up. That can, in my experience, is a little bit, I'm not going to say simpler is not a good word, because there's nothing simple about this, but if you're doing a quantitative study, backed by the actual numerical data, that tends to go a little bit more smoothly when you're getting to the defense. Getting into qualitative, is a little bit tougher, but I think the key takeaway there is you don't want to make, because we inherently go into these research projects with our idea of what's going to happen, or you can even call it, like I said in the quote there, or a wish of what's going to happen. We're going to do this study and this is what's going to happen. But you got to have the evidence to back that up. And, we'll get into it when we talk about some other quotes, but that's why when you hit those stumbling blocks, a big part of being successful is recognizing that it's not always going to go to plan. It's not going to always go smooth sailing. Most likely there's going to be some things you have to deal with. But if you can connect your claim, if you can connect it and keep that golden thread intact where you're connecting it to your data and you have the evidence to back it up, And it may not be the evidence that you, to use the term, that you wished for, but I think that's an important part of this is being able to back up your claims and assertions with actual data and evidence.
I agree with you. And we're saying, so just to make sure we're clear, you're saying that even up to and including the point of your final chapters, when you're interpreting, when you're discussing, and when you're going over the implications of your conclusions and the claims that you've made, even up to that point, that golden thread has got to be sewed into your work, even all the way to that very end point. Like when you're at the borders and the edges of the work, all of that still has to be tied in. That's what we're saying here?
I think it has to be. And if your chair and committee are doing their job, they will let you know if it's not. It's got to be connected. It has to remain intact. At least if you're one of my candidates, it has to remain intact. I'll be the first one to let you know. Well, wait a minute, we're skewing off here.
I said, where were you during my PhD, bro? Like, I feel like I should have come to. What's happening? Let's move on to your third gem here, your third pearl of wisdom. Research progresses over small steps and visible work, not heroic all-nighters. Now, I feel like that you triggered me a little bit. Like, I feel like you're taking shots at here, but that's okay. That's fine. Because I agree with you. Look, in an ideal world, we'd all take things one step at a time, right? Like making things slow and consistent, progress in composed and clear-minded fashion. But you know how it is. Life won't permit the privilege of time more often than not. So what do we do when we all have only a few precious hours scattered throughout the week and we're caught between like shifts and non-academic responsibilities? How do we make sure that we're progressing those small steps with visible work when we're fighting against limited time?
I think it's important to note that I've done my fair share of all-nighters. Okay, so I'm guilty as charged on that. But I think you got to approach it more of like running a marathon and not a sprint. And you have to have a level to get to this point to go for a PhD. It's almost got to be an obsession, right? It's obviously a passion. If I'm not pulled into something with my family or have something going on, I'm working on this project because it's so self-driven at this point. If you don't have that little bit of I'm just going to call it obsession, which, I'm guilty again, OCD, you got to have a little bit of that obsession to be successful, to see it through, because if you're not working on it, well, maybe you should be working on it. What are you doing right now? And I understand, again, life happens. There's going to be curveballs and distractions, but you've got to keep steadily working, even if it's just, hey, I want to add to my lit review today. I want to do, 10 pages, get 5 sources together, look at these 5 sources, constantly doing something, working towards, like we mentioned, those milestones before, and just working the plan. I remember I read a book when I was doing my dissertation, again, back in 2009, 2010. And I can't remember the name of the book, and I apologize for that, but they had a quote in there. It was about, finishing your dissertation, and it said, the master of P and A becomes the ABD. And what they were saying was P for procrastination, A for avoidance. If you master procrastination and avoidance, you get the ABD, all but dissertation. So I think it's a key point. I actually wrote that on a Post-it and had it on my computer screen when I was working on my dissertation, because it's easy to say, well, I'll work on this tomorrow, or I'll do this later. I don't feel like doing it right now. But it almost, if you want to be successful at this level, it almost takes an obsession. And, maybe obsession is too harsh. Maybe I should just say a passion. I don't know. But you have to continuously work on it, even if it's approaching it like a marathon, slow and steady, making this progress we need. I've seen it happen all too often. Well, I'm going to take this term off, or I'm going to take this semester off, whatever the verbiage is, and then they don't finish.
Right.
They're at real danger of not finishing. So I think it has to be approached as a marathon, rather than just procrastinating and then, I got to get this done, now I have to work all night to get it done. And everybody's an individual. That may work for some people, but from what I've found, again, in my experience personally and with candidates, it's much better to work on that progressively, steadily throughout the process.
No, listen, I agree with you. I actually think, listen, we can go with the harsher language. This is expert academia back here. We behind the scenes over here. So this is where we break all the rules and still win everything. This is what we do over this X-rated academia. this is this is the proper stuff. And obsession, I think obsession is a nice term. Like, I think that's a nice way to think about it, because I mean, we've said it before in previous podcasts, and yes, that is a shout out for all of y'all watching this to go and check out the previous podcast. What are you doing? Why are you procrastinating? Check out the other podcast. But the point is, yes, exactly. Watch the podcast. But the point is, I agree. I think it has to be the kind of thing that is on your mind 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and not in terms of, principally not in terms of it being a punishment, like not in terms of it being punitive or wondering why you're not doing anything. But I think the answer that you gave was excellent. If you're not doing something, why are you not doing something? Like, why are you not working on this? Why are you not turning your attention to it? So does that mean, just to kind of be clear, does that mean that what we're suggesting here is that, look, even if the work that you did today doesn't live up to whatever your wildest expectations were, doesn't mean that you finished a whole chapter today, or it doesn't mean that you found every one of the sources that you intended to, or you collected every piece of data you wanted to, but the idea is that you were doing something today. Like, even if you're working on small pieces where time will permit, that's permissible, just so long as you are making that progress. Is that what you were saying?
Absolutely. And I think that's the key takeaway too, is that we're at least, and there's a psychological aspect for the researcher too, that, you know, if you're just standing there or sitting there in front of a computer screen doing absolutely nothing, it's like there's a feeling with that, right? You get the feeling of, oh, I'm not doing anything. But even if you're doing things that don't make it into your final project or need further refinement, at least you're working on it and you can see some progress. And, you know, it's about that momentum, keeping that momentum going in this and not getting stagnant, because when you start to get stagnant, right, you procrastinate, you avoid, and you start to look not finishing. You know, you want to finish, you want to go across the finish line, and it takes, you know, I'll say it again, it takes that obsession with the project to get it done.
Our fourth pearl of wisdom is that feasibility is not a compromise. It's a difference between a dream and a degree. But these are nice, wise words. But if I've understood you correctly, what we're saying here is, and correct me if I have, but is that the point is that practicality and viability are necessary features of a successful project. And while I wholly agree with you, how do we determine what is feasible, particularly if it's something that's entirely novel, both to the researcher and supposedly to academia? So if I'm doing something new that's, you know, supposed to be a meaningful contribution to academia, as well as something new to me, like I've never done this before myself, how do I determine what is and isn't feasible? How do I know what works as a feasible project?
That's a great question. I'm so glad you asked it, because I've experienced this as a dissertation chair. You know, when my candidate has an idea, the first thing I remind them sometimes is that your goal here is to graduate, is to finish, right? You know, sometimes we have these ideas where we want to change the world, we want to save the world, you know. Do that after you get the PhD at the end of your name. You know, for now, we want to get across the finish line. And I think your key question there of how do you know, again, it gets down to that communication with your chair. You know, I think that's where the chair's insight is going to be valuable to the candidate to present. Well, this is my idea. You know, I've actually had colleagues that were working on their PhD, and they presented their idea to their dissertation chair, and the first thing they said was, "Well, I would like to hood you in the graduation ceremony sometime, and what you've presented, it ain't going to happen anytime soon if you go this route. We need to refine it and narrow it down and narrow it more and narrow it some more." It's important to recognize, that's, to me anyway, that's one of the reasons your chair is there, is to help you refine that and narrow it down where we can get it to a point where you can finish and you can defend it and you can graduate, and then you can move on and save the world and change the world. After you're done paying tuition, after you're done doing all the research, you'll get finished. That's the beauty of this. You just need to get to a point where you can get this project done. So one of the first questions that comes to my mind when I'm looking at it is, you know, how feasible is this? You know, do I see the end goal is it there, or is it way too big and we need to narrow it down? And I think, again, to use a similar response, I think that's where your chair, that's part of the job, is to help the candidates refine it and get it to a point where they can finish it up. Because I take it personally as a chair. If you get to a point and you're at the defense and there's major issues, what was the chair doing?
Yeah.
Right? The chair needs to make sure that we don't get to that point where there's major issues, right? So, again, I think that keeping that dialogue and that communication open, and just continuously looking at, relying upon your chair to help you refine that and get it to a point where you can actually defend it and you can finish it and you can go on and do even greater things.
Let's move on to your fifth and your final gem, your pearl of wisdom here. Our last few wise words that we've got for our students, which is to say, you said in research, persistence beats brilliance every time. And okay, I agree with you. But have you ever heard that phrase, the good news is you came a long way, the bad news is you went the wrong way? You heard that?
Yeah.
And so how do we make sure that we're persisting in the right direction and not just doubling down on a path that's leading further and further away from that finished project that we need to get to so badly? Like, how do I know that I'm persisting in the right direction?
That's a great question. You've done this a few times, I guess, right? With these questions, they're really good. But I think to use something we hit on earlier, the chair is so important in this. And I think, to know that you're on the right path, it's the chair's, it's part of their responsibility. If you're not on the right path, to bring you back in line. And the resilience piece of this is so very important, because there's going to inevitably be stumbling blocks along the way. Very rarely do I have a candidate that goes through the whole process and they haven't had to change something, or maybe a committee member has left the university and they have to change that, and maybe their chair left and they're on their second chair. I've even known some colleagues that have had 3 chairs. They keep, having these issues. But the key takeaway from this resilience piece is that you will be knocked down along the way. You will be. And the key is to keep getting back up.
Why do we fall, sir? So that we can learn to pick ourselves up.
Check your ego at the door. It can be a very humbling experience, because at this point, hey, you are brilliant. You've got a master's degree. You've got all this doctoral coursework you've done. You're a very smart person. And sometimes it can be very humbling to hear, well, you need to change this, you need to change that. So it's important that you check your ego at the door, and just understand that your chair and your committee, they want the best end result for you. They want it to be sound. Their name's going on it as well. So they want it to be good. They want it to be solid. And so there may be some times you have it in your mind, this is what I want to do, and your chair wants to make a change, or a committee member wants to make a change. Again, keep that finish line in mind. We want to finish. I can tell you, when I was going through my dissertation process, I had a committee member, and it looked like they cut themselves and bled all over my paper, so much red ink.
Wow.
And I can tell you, I went through that, and my mindset was, look, buddy, if it gets you to sign off on it, I'll change it. And I think that's kind of the mindset you have to have. Now, again, there's certain things you may want to try to stick to your guns,
right,
and you can have that dialogue. But I think never forgetting that your committee members and your chair want this to be solid at the end. They want to get you to that point where it's solid. And so sometimes you have to have a little bit of humility. If you don't, I will tell you from experience, you'll have you'll be humbled along the way. Okay, so it's important that that resilience piece is a critical aspect of this. You get knocked down. What do you do after you get knocked down? Do you give up, or do you keep at it, keep going, keep trying? And I think that's a key part of this. And we mentioned planning. Sometimes it doesn't go to our plan. right? And we have to adjust our plan, but that's part of this process too. There's a great quote. I know it's not a scholar, but the boxer Mike Tyson, right? He has a great quote. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
In the face.
You know, so you're going to get punched in the face. You're going to get knocked down. And the key is
they punch you back in the face.
Getting back up and keep working at it, even through those times that humble you. You're going to be stronger as a result of it, and your end product, your dissertation is going to be stronger as a result of it too. So never lose sight on that. And it's easier said than done, but I would say try not to take things personally. I know I just said you're obsessed about it, you're passionate about it. Why on earth would you not take it personally, right? It's hard, but I think that balance is important, that you just keep that perspective. They're only there to try to make it solid and to get you across that finish line. And sometimes you check your ego at the door.
I'm with you 1,000%. And we hope that whenever you do get punched in the face, it ain't Mike Tyson on the other end of that punch. You know what I mean? Because some of those you don't get up from. Like, I don't know what to tell you. If he's hitting me, I'm out. It's over. But okay,
I don't care how old he is.
No.
You take a punch from Tyson, you're going down.
I'm not doing that. I'm good. Whatever he wants me to change, I'm changing my thesis. It's cool. It's all right. I'm not doing that.
That's right.
But let me ask you this question, because since we've mentioned this a couple of times, and I feel like, somewhere along the line we need to get a little real. And since we've said on a couple of occasions here that, look, that many of the solutions or many of the options available to us are going to come down to conversations and communication with our chairs or our supervisors or our professors or whoever they may happen to be that's overseeing the project. Whether that is your PhD or your MA or your MBA or whatever it is that you're doing in postgraduate education, I completely agree with you. I think you're absolutely right. That relationship between yourself and your chair, the person who's supposed to be guiding your way through this, is crucial. I totally agree with you. But since that is the case, since it is true, that relationship is so crucial. And since it is important that, we have to check our egos at the door, in those rare instances, however rare they may be, but in those instances where there is just a disagreement, shall we say, kind of a conflict in terms of direction, opinion, preference, so on and so forth. If there's something that just falls out of balance between yourself and your chair, yourself and your professor, supervisor, whoever they may be, if something doesn't quite work, at what point, in your opinion and with your experience, do you think it's appropriate for a student to start thinking about, okay, do I just need another chair like that person that you had mentioned a moment ago who had 2, 3, or 4 of them? Where along the line do I think, okay, maybe it's reasonable or feasible for me to consider changing the chair? Or is that never an option? Do you just consistently persist with that one individual, no matter how much you disagree, no matter how much that relationship is fractured, you just keep doing what it is that they're saying? Is there a point at which it's a meaningful consideration to think, okay, maybe this relationship ain't working? Is that a thing?
Absolutely. And I would say you should never be in a situation where you're just, it's not working and you think, well, I'm just stuck. I'm stuck with this person. I'll just, again, be real. We're talking about being real. Not every chair is going to be great. Okay. Certainly not as great as me, right? Kidding. Kidding, of course. But that's the truth. And sometimes it's just not a good fit, right? That's one thing you got to look at too, is this a good fit for me? I tend to be very direct, but I do so in a very empathetic and respectful way. And I stick to the facts and so forth. But some people might say, well, that's too harsh. That's not touchy-feely enough, But again, my whole focus is to get you finished, right? I want you to finish. But that's not to say, okay, that there's chairs out there, maybe they had a miserable experience when they were doing their dissertation, and by golly, they're going to make sure that you have a miserable experience too, right? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that doesn't happen, because I'm sure it does. But the key point for you as a student or as a candidate, doctoral candidate, to realize is this meaningful? Is this relationship meaningful? Is the feedback I'm getting meaningful? Is the feedback useful? Or is it just, do I feel like I'm kicking the can down the road? And you absolutely have that right as a candidate to have that dialogue with your chair. And if the chair, if you can't resolve it, you have that right to say, well, I need to go in a different direction, and I would certainly encourage every candidate to do that. Because again, hello, you're paying tuition here. You want to get done. You want to get finished. And if there's someone if it's a toxic relationship, and for whatever reason you don't feel like you're getting what you need, you certainly have that right as a student. Obviously, my preference is that we work things out, and just get honestly. We're both professionals here at this point. Honestly, work it out. But again, some people have the baggage they bring with them, and they have this mindset that they had a terrible experience. They're going to make sure that the candidate has a terrible experience. That's not me. I was blessed and had a great experience in my doctoral program, but I always try to make sure that we're focused on that end result, getting finished, getting done. Sometimes my wife does a great job of this. We need somebody to tell us, hey, you're being a butthead, right? We need somebody to tell us that sometimes, to keep us in check, and that's where that communication comes in.
Yes, sir. Blessings to wifey.
25 years, brother. 25 years. Must be doing something right.
Hey. Blessings to wifey and to yourself. Congratulations, sir. 25 years is a thing, bro. That's a couple PhDs. That's a whole thing. That's kind of impressive, bro. That's 2 or 3 PhDs. That's nicely done.
My wife is a saint. She married. I should give hope to everyone out there that there's someone out there for you. If I've been married for 25 years, somebody married this and has stayed married to this for 25 years, there's hope for anybody.
Yeah, but that's only because the dynamic is she's the chair and you the candidate. That's why this is working.
That's right. Know
I
your
agree
place. Know your role.
Listen, you ain't never gonna hear an argument from me, bro. I completely agree with you 1,000%. Look, I think everything you're saying is absolutely correct. And let me just say, now that we're at this stage, I want to just take an opportunity to thank you for those pearls of wisdom. I wholeheartedly agree with you. And even if it is the case, I mean, I think in my experience, the communication was there with my PhD supervisor, but the problem might have been too much. I think I might have been too frank. You know what I mean? Like, the issue might have been me, but that's okay. That's a story for another day. We'll save that for another podcast, but that's fine.
Absolutely.
That said, look, I just wanted to thank you for those gems, those pearls of wisdom. I appreciate you taking the time to do that, and kind of shining a light on what you think our students should be aware of in order to help them get through their projects. Is there anything else that you want to kind of put onto the end of this, or just a nice little reminder that you think that our students should be aware of before we sign off?
Yeah, just again, the key point in all of this is you want to cross that finish line. And you wouldn't be at this point if you're working on a dissertation if you weren't capable. So it's all about having the right mindset that, how do I get from here to getting across that finish line, keeping that open communication and being authentic. Again, that's part of my research I've been doing lately is into authentic leadership. And I think there's the authenticity of this, just being authentic and knowing who you are, where you are in this process and where you want to go is going to serve you well. And, but I mean, you can do this, you can do it. It's hard. You're taking on a significant challenge. Sure. But you can do it. You wouldn't be at this point if you weren't capable. So again, surrounding yourself with the right team and the right people, believing in yourself, and just being authentic to yourself is going to take you a long way.
That is a wrap for today's episode of the Grad Coach Podcast, the GCPC. A huge thank you again to you, Dr. Adams, for sharing those insights. For all of our audience members, though, don't forget to grab a free copy of your free Grad Coach Research Toolkit. It is loaded with templates, checklists, video tutorials, and all the little things that, when your chair isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing, we've got the information right here. The guides that will save you time and stress. You will find all of that in the link below somewhere for you in the description. And last but not least, remember to hit the like and the subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes, and feel free to comment and ask any questions that you want us to put to our next professors. We are going to have plenty more of expert advice lined up to help you on your research journey. Until then, peace, productivity, and positive results. Thank you, guys.